Hello, BookTube. We're back to the library tour, and how's this for an action shot? I mentioned in an earlier video that I finally, after 3 years and 15,000 videos on BookTube, I finally invested in a piece of technology. I invested in a very cheap plastic tripod. The kind with the knobby legs that you can twist and turn in all directions. They can grip things. And it's been a revelation. It's so much better than the setup that I had. The setup that I had before is not worth talking about. And the next investment immediately suggests itself, which is a better phone, a bigger phone. An iPhone 7S is the one I have my eye on, but we shall see. We shall see. This is certainly good enough. So I'm able to give you this dynamic action sequence vantage point by using this tripod, and that's just as well because we're on the top shelf of this next bookcase, and that makes filming difficult. So we've got some lateral stacking here. I'm just going to throw those on the bed, and rather than try and find a place for them way up here in the bird's nest view. So the first one is a modern library giant of the poems and plays of Robert Browning, and I got it for the tacky old cover of him laying on his sofa reading. And I am a big fan of Robert Browning. I may be his last one on Earth, although maybe not, because I've heard rumors of a big critical edition of his poems coming out in 2020. So either it'll be a big critical edition of his poems, or it might be a big biography. I'll take either one. And that would mean there would be at least one other Browning fan. And then this next one is a box. This is in a box. This is, I don't know who does this. Could this be a very old folio society? Oh no, this is Heritage Press. They did a set of these American poets, and this is Longfellow. They did them for lots of different poets. I don't think I have any of the others. I think the Longfellow one might be the only one that I kept, and they're lovely. They're here, let me show you. They're illustrated. That's just beautiful. And that you've got half-page illustrations, spot illustrations, and also full illustrations. And they are by let's see, Boyd Hannah. And it's the loveliest edition of Longfellow that I've ever seen. So I kept it, even though I have Penguin Classic selected Longfellow and I think a critical edition. Okay, now how are we going to do this? These things are wedged in here. All right, well, we'll just forge ahead. If there's a catastrophe, there'll be a catastrophe. So the first one we have here, this is John Marsden's The Illustrated Bede. The Venerable Bede is a medieval author that I just love. I read his book all the time in the Penguin Classic. And this is an English language translation of his work, only it's heavily illustrated in color to sort of show you Bede's world and the kinds of things that he was talking about, not only the natural world, but the ecclesiastical world. I love it. I wish I had a nice durable hardcover of it. That one is, I don't know if you could tell, but it's a kind of a stiff trade paperback that makes reading kind of perilous. You're worried you're going to crack it. Okay. All right. This is an anthology edited by James Serpell. This is the domestic dog. Just a thin thing about Canis Familiaris, how it came about, what the breeds are like, what things are true about them that aren't true about wild dogs and whatnot. I've had, in the course of my 28 years, I've had many books on dogs. This is one I go back to more often than not. So it made it into this room. You got to have some dog books in this room. I think that book, the new book that I just got, Dogs in Art, will probably make its way in here. Okay, this is Andrew Pedigree. This is the book in the Renaissance, a trade paperback from Yale of his great examination of. I mean, the Italian Renaissance was, the age of a renewal in literature, in literary circles, and in writing circles. And he examines the role that the book itself played in that renewal. Just fascinating. Okay, this next one is Lewis Crompton. This is Homosexuality and Civilization. Great big. Well done book. Who is this? This is the Belknap Press of Harvard University Press. I have this sort of ad hoc transformed hardcover. I'd really like to find this again in a hardcover with a dust jacket instead of this thing, because I really liked it, and I would be due for a reread. I would gladly reread it if I found it again. Okay, this next one is more recent by far. This should probably have a pub sheet still in it. Yeah, 2017. This is Once Upon an Algorithm, and that uses children's stories and a Sherlock Holmes story and a couple of other well-known narratives to illustrate how algorithms work and what they do and how they can be constructed. I absolutely loved it. I am fascinated by algorithms, of course, since they rule the world. They are operating this camera. They operate this phone. They will certainly be necessary in order to get this phone to communicate its video, the video that I'm taking right now, to my computer. And then it will also be necessary to upload that, and then their algorithms will determine, whether or not you see this. Even if you're subscribed to my channel, algorithms will still determine that. And they determine a lot more, too. The planes that are flying right now, 35,000 feet above your head, are being flown by algorithms. And if they crash, they'll be crashed by algorithms as well. And so I find it fascinating. I've read a lot of books on the subject. This one is one of my favorites. I think it's the only one on tech or algorithms that have made it into this room. Okay. David Bentley Hart. This is his translation of the New Testament. Just spectacularly thought-provoking. I mean, the long introduction alone, but also this is not a New Testament like the kind that you remember, or the kind that comes immediately to mind when you think about them. And I have a number of different things like that. I have a number of New Testaments in this room. I think it's just a remarkable compendium of little books. I will read any new translation. I reread old translations all the time, reread scholarship on it all the time. I mean, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I love the Chosen People, and I love the Old Testament. But the New Testament, of course, is, the defining book of my life, your life, our world. So whenever anybody comes out with a great new translation, David Bentley Hart is fantastic. I don't always agree with him. I seem to remember, I could be wrong about this, but I seem to remember that I am blurbed on the trade paperback of this. I'll have to remember to check into that. Obviously, Yale is not going to send it to me, so I'll have to gently remind them and find out if that's true. It might not be true. I'd still like the trade paperback. The next one is old. How old is this? Well over 100 years. 1907. This is 1907. This is Guglielmo Ferrero. He did a one-volume history of notable personalities in ancient Rome that made him a king's ransom 100 years ago. It allowed him to write at leisure. It sold everywhere. It sold in schools. Everybody talked about it. And he did a big multi-volume work, The Greatness and Decline of Rome, very much meant to be in a kind of dialogue with Gibbon. And he, this was just discarded. Somebody wrote in magic marker, discard, on the front page. It's a discarded library book. Went in this series, The Greatness and Decline of Rome, he takes you from the height of the Republic to the birth of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. And volume 2 in the series is the only one that he devotes to one person. He just devotes it to Julius Caesar. So that's all that this is. This is an enormously erudite biography of Julius Caesar. Ferrero, rightly, I think, decided that if I'm writing, a narrative that is meant to cover this seismic change in the nature of ancient Rome, well, a keynote of that seismic change is embodied in one man, and telling his life story is the best way possible to tell that transition. I agree with that completely. This should, by rights, be out with biographies. And so should this next one. What? No. This is Michael McDonough. This is probably from the 1950s. No, 1929. I should have known it wouldn't be the 1950s, right? When you think about it. Of course it wouldn't be the 1950s. This is The English King. A study of what the king is, what his powers are, what they aren't, what his current standing is in society, that sort of thing. Of course, it wouldn't be the 1950s. England hasn't had a king in a very long time. England hasn't had a king in the lifetime of almost everyone in England. Virtually no one in England remembers the king. They remember a queen, the queen who has ruled for, I don't even know how long. I don't even know how long. And Queen Elizabeth II will probably stay on the throne for another decade or more before we have a king. And who knows what will happen after that? Who knows what will happen after that? The British public, usually when they're polled in non-rabid, non-politically biased polls, the British public usually says something along the lines of, we want the monarchy as long as the Queen is the head of it, but once she's gone, maybe it's time for it to go too. Quite a few people, not necessarily Republicans in the small r sense of the word, but quite a few people just across the board of British society would rather get rid of the monarchy than have King Charles III. And I don't know what that says. I have a feeling that those numbers would change drastically if you went to King William V. I have a feeling that no one would object to the monarchy being continued under King William. It's King Charles. He hasn't actually endeared himself to a large chunk of the British populace. Certainly not to the point where they want him to be king. And this being 2019, the average person in the British street who is asked about this thinks they have a flippant say in the matter. Actually, it's between God and the throne. They are not involved. They are on the outside looking in. But we can't talk that way in the 21st century. So everybody thinks, well, yeah, if I can get the American Idol contestant that I want on the throne, then I'm okay with this 1,000-year institution continuing. But if not, if it's that grody guy, then no, not really. So I keep this as a curiosity, but it actually belongs, obviously it belongs out with the monarchy books. Okay. All right. This is the New Testament again. We have another New Testament here. This is Everyman's Library did this. This is the King James New Testament. Not the whole King James Bible. I have that too. I think I have that too in Everyman Library as well. And there are multiple King James Bibles in this room. But this is just that. This is just the New Testament. And I love it. I've gone back to this. I found this at a used bookstore. I think this was the Brattle. I found it a few years ago, and I was very happy that it already had the library prophylactic here, the library plastic covering, so I didn't have to worry about it, because I go back to it all the time. I reach up to this shelf all the time. It is shorter than the other books, so that even with the lateral book stacked on top of it, I can still pull it easily out off the shelf. I don't know what it says about me, but I have a personal need to go back and read the Gospel according to St. Luke quite often. Quite often. I'd say once a month conservatively. The others too, sure, even John. But I'm glad that I have this separately. I have other big whole King Jameses as well. Okay, what this next one is... all right. This is also fairly recent. 2015, before we knew each other. This is edited by Alice Crawford, and it is The Meaning of the Library, A Cultural History. And it's just a collection of essays on what libraries have meant throughout time, what they mean today. I don't know what it's doing in this room. I think we'd all agree the libraries are for losers. But nevertheless, you'd almost think I like libraries because it's in this room. Oh, no! All right, this next one is by Wayne Wigand, and it is Part of Our Lives, A People's History of the American Public Library. Again, I should stress, libraries are for losers, but still, I have another book on libraries. This is the same thing. In fact, this also will have a pub sheet. This is also 2015. Good year for books on libraries. I wrote about, I think, one of these two. I might have written about both of them. As usual, when I'm uploading this, I'll try to find all of the times when I wrote about any of these books. Sometimes that's harder to do than others, mainly for procedural reasons. For 10 years, I wrote book reviews and also kept my book blog, Stevereads, on the old Open Letters Monthly website. And we have Open Letters Monthly transformed into Open Letters Review, and a great deal of that old material, all of my material from that old site, is being sort of ported over to st.donoghue.com, which is my website where eventually I want all of my writing anywhere to be. And it's a little bit time consuming to go through that and look for older books like this that have been reviewed, because the porting process, as some of you will know if you've ever done this, when you port mass stuff over like that with spacing brackets and pictures and indentations, type fonts and all that, it doesn't come over. It comes over in one great unamalgamated mess, and you have to fix it on the other end. And that's fine by me, because that means I can make it look the way I want it to look. But it is time consuming. And also things fall through the cracks, especially with Stevereads. I've noticed that I will know for sure that I wrote about such a book on Stevereads. I simply won't be able to find it because things have fallen through the cracks between the old site and the new site. So that if you look at some of the links that I leave below to older pieces and they look a little dodgy, that's the reason why. I don't have an intern, a bigger production number literary journal would have an intern or two who would do this themselves. It would just be their job to say, all right, well, for 4 hours every morning, I'm going to sit at my desk and go through old ported over pieces and fix them. So add the line breaks, add the photos again, that sort of thing. I'm just going to go through and fix them. I'm going to go through and clean them up 4 hours every day. Ordinarily that would be the job of some intern, and then that would be done. But I don't have an intern. All right. Well, this next one is something we've seen before. This is the Book of Merlin. Another copy of the Book of Merlin. I love this book. See, there's a goat talking to a dog. Because the goat has referred to, they're talking about animals. This is a great modern day fantasy parable, where an old King Arthur is called to a convocation of animals by his old tutor, the wizard Merlin, in order to discuss the worth of mankind and mankind's place among the ranks of animals. And at one point, the goat makes an extremely unwise comment about how most domesticated animals are a little more than parasites. And King Arthur's dog has a problem with that. He says, the goat observes slyly, parasites. At this, Cavil, that's the king's dog, got off his master's lap, and he and the new king walked over to the goat on stiff legs. Cavil spoke in human speech for the first and last time in his long life, in unison with his master. His voice sounded like a Teuton speaking through a trumpet. "Did you say parasites?" they asked, the dog and the king. "Just say that once again, will you, until we punch your head?" The goat regarded them with amused affection, but refused to have a row. "If you punched my head," he said, "you would get a pair of bloody knuckles. Besides, I take it back." And this is... I cannot... we just talked about it, so I don't have to talk about it again, but I cannot praise the book highly enough. It is amazing. Okay, this next one is a kid's book, also something we have seen before. This is I Am the Mummy Heb Nefert. This is written by Eve Bunting and illustrated by David Christiana, and it is about a young woman, a young girl in ancient Egypt named Heb Nefert, who is a princess and who is destined to marry the future ruler of the Twin Lands. And she has a cat that she loves, and she loves the bright sunlight, and she loves walking on the riverbank by the weeds, and she loves eventually her lord, and her life is bright, and she dances for him. And then time passes, and long time, and the spirit of the mummy Heb Nefert is suddenly floating over a glass case in a museum. And she sees these things. What are those things? What on earth are they? A child at the museum, not much younger than what she was, is looking at that thing and saying, was this a person? And this? And our narration is by Heb Nefert. How foolish that they do not see how all things change, and so will they. 3,000 years from now, they will be dust and bones. I am the mummy Heb Nefert, black as night, stretched as tight as leather on a drum. Once, I was beautiful. Glad I have another copy. I don't need many copies, though. Multiple copies is a little bit weird. And then the last thing for this shelf is... oh, God. is by the Belknap Press of Harvard University Press. I think we saw this when I got it, or maybe when I hauled it or something or other. This is the annotated Edgar Allan Poe. And Harvard does these great annotated editions. You've got the text of the short stories and the poems and whatnot, and then you've got the annotation in offset colored type. And the whole thing also has illustrations as well, all kinds of illustrations. Not just black and whites of all the people that Poe knew, but also all of the artwork that he might have seen, all of the things that might have stirred his sick little imagination. It's truly a Poe volume to have, and hence I have it. So there you go. That is the top shelf of this library tour that we're just now going to continue every day. And there were, as with every shelf in this library so far, almost, there are some weak links. There are some things that, if they don't belong gone from my collection just in general, certainly don't belong in this room. So that's the whole point. So I will continue to rethink. But for now, we'll wrap this up, and then we will move on. Tomorrow we'll do another shelf, and who knows what our sexy camera angle will be like then. I will experiment all over again. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.